Us gamers, we are a smart group of people. Like others who've only heard of Mario and Grand Theft Auto, we understand violence in video games. We know that violence should stay in video games unless necessary. We can be the character game developers want us to be, explore different scenarios, and just let our stress out. No matter how similar the world we explore in games are to real life, we always know who we are in the game, our motivations, and our purpose. Sometimes these games could teach us something about life, possibly viewing the world in a different way. And we will give the middle finger to any family member, politician, or prick who says that people who play violent video games will become violent people. And I think we all know how false that statement is. But what if there's a game, one that does ask you to kill bad guys with guns and knives? And of course there are many games that want you to do that. But what if there was a game which made you feel that violence in the real world could be a lot of fun? For a split second, I smiled at the thought. The first Hotline Miami was released in 2012. It was met with critical acclaim and created a huge following through its fans. In less than 3 years, Denton Games created a sequel and probably the last game in this short series. This is Hotline Miami 2 Raw Number. To those of you who've been watching my videos for quite the time now, you know that I call Hotline Miami 2 one of my most anticipated games during both 2014 and 2015. And now that it's finally here, the big question is, how is it? Well, if there hasn't been one before now, then I call this game the definition of a perfect sequel. Hotline Miami 2's story can almost directly be compared to that of Pulp Fiction. Taking place between the early 80s to the mid 90s, the game switches you between different characters and time periods every level. This works just as well as it did in Pulp Fiction. It asks you to piece everything together as the information is being given to you, although the entire story does make much more sense during a second playthrough. There are over a dozen characters that you play as, ranging from fans of the original Hotline Miami killer, a journalist that wants to get the full story, a cop that's never really heard of the rules, and even a soldier during a war in Miami. All characters have different motives for killing, which give the developers a more creative freedom on who you're fighting as well as where, and this certainly shows. The game ties up some loose plot ends for the first game, while also telling multiple stories that are very interesting, and even dealing with the theme of violence in a different way from its predecessor, but nonetheless just as effective. Graphically, the game is almost identical to its predecessor. Only differences are that there are more details and objects hidden in the environment, and it's clear that the developers are using the entire rainbow throughout the game instead of just red. Even more than in its predecessor, 16-bit graphics still look awesome, especially when it's mixed with arguably the greatest thing in Hotline Miami 2, its soundtrack. In my original Hotline Miami review, I said that the game's soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks in any video game. Well, I want to take that statement back because I thought this was impossible. Hotline Miami 2's soundtrack is way better than the originals. Not only are there more songs than its predecessor had, but just listen to how awesome these songs are. The music is so perfect, I have every song on my iPod, and I'm not even a huge techno fan. And when the music blends with the on-screen visuals, it provides an unexplainable sense of pleasure that can't be compared to anything else. There's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. While other developers usually keep the main game the same and add things that are absolutely pointless, Denton Games left the perfect combat system alone and added a handful of gameplay tweaks that enhance the overall experience. No matter which character you are, your goal is to kill everyone in the room either through personal melee encounters or different types of firearms. Controlling your character is easy, so with most encounters, failure can only be blamed on yourself. Like the original, killing is as easy as getting killed, which makes this game incredibly hard. For those of you that have beaten the first game, the last few levels in the original game are just as hard as the first few in the sequel. The game is that hard. With rooms up to 30 people, it can become pretty stressful. There were a couple levels where I was stuck on it for a whole hour, and I was the one who got an A+ rankings on each level in the original. And while I would be 100% okay with punishing hard difficulty, there is one thing I find totally unfair, which is also the game's biggest problem: level design. Now I will say I love the levels with multiple rooms, corridors, and choke points, big or small. But I absolutely hate getting killed because I couldn't see enemies that were far away. Even with the ability to look across huge portions of the map, I still get killed by enemies I physically can't see, which is unacceptable. And yet, I still didn't want to quit after the 50th try at a level, simply because the game is that addicting. A big gameplay mechanic in the first game that they took away for the sequel was the ability to choose an animal mask that gives you a bonus power. Instead, like mentioned before, the game switches characters every level, and each of them have their own sets of skills and disadvantages. There's a character that can shoot 2 machine guns Rambo style, the soldier that switches between a gun and a knife, and even a journalist that can clear levels without killing anyone simply because he isn't a killer. What I found cool about him is that if you beat enough guys against the ground, he'll take his jacket off and become okay with the thought of killing, which I found very interesting. But then there's my favorite, the 2 siblings that team up. One runs around with a chainsaw while the other shoots enemies to cover his back. Different characters force you to fight using different styles, which made every level feel fresh. And in fact, that's one of my favorite things about Hotline Miami 2, variety. The scenario always changes, time period always changes, characters always change, song always changes, and the style of play always changes. Every scene is distinctly different from one another, while simultaneously making the entire experience feel very coherent. I never got sick of the game once, and I always wanted to continue to see what events would happen next. The game takes around 8 to 12 hours to complete, which means it's more than 3 times as long as the original game. Replay value consists of replaying levels to get a higher score as well as a higher letter grade. Once your friends get a hold of the game, you'll have the urge to compete for the highest spots of the leaderboard. And you'll also want to replay the game again so you can understand the story better. And so you can replay that awesome ending sequence. Hotline Miami 2 Raw Number is the definition of a perfect sequel. The game is better than the original in literally every single way possible. Better gameplay, better story, better music, and better pacing. And while there are moments in which the game is unacceptably hard, I still couldn't stop playing it. If you love the original, you will fall head over heels for the sequel. You won't stop thinking about it for a long time, and you will want to keep revisiting the game over and over again. If you haven't played the original, I strongly suggest you go ahead and do so that you may understand the story and become skilled at its gameplay. For only $15, you have no reason not to play this. So far, Hotline Miami 2 is the best game of the year so far and will be a nominee for 2015's Game of the Year. Hotline Miami 2 Raw Number receives a 9.5 out of 10. Thank you for watching Bathroom Gamers. Future videos include the PlayStation 4 exclusive Bloodborne review, which comes out the 24th of March, the Resident Evil Revelations 2 review, which is now fully available in both digital and physical forms, and if you guys want it, the Episode 2 of Tales from the Borderlands review. If you want to see a review on Episode 2, comment below to let me know you want to see it, or comment saying you don't want to see it. I won't be offended. Thank you for watching, and stay fresh.